Welcome to the Bird Podcast. I'm Shobha Narayan, and where we are is the island of Mauritius. I was invited to a book festival here, and I was happy to go. What we are looking at is a colony of village weavers, and I'll tell you about them. But first, what can I tell you about this island? Well, it was sculpted by volcanoes, and it's called the Pearl of the Indian Ocean. It has 330 kilometers of coastlines, and what's great is that the entire coastline is sheltered by a coral reef, which means that you can swim in the ocean because the sea is calm. Mauritius was discovered rather recently. In the 10th century, Arab sailors visited this island and they called it Dina Arobi. Then in the 15th century, the Portuguese took over, and then a Dutch fleet took over, and then the French took over, and finally the United Kingdom or the British. So you have these layers of colonial invasions. And today, this island is unique because you have people looking like us, the Indians, but they speak French. It is part of the African continent, and in fact, it's the only African country with a Hindu majority. And some of the senior government posts are held by Hindus, originally from India. There are also people who speak Creole, French, and there are Sino-Mauritians from China. The village weaver's nest that I discovered was by the road. I took a walk from my hotel early one morning, and there was farmland. People were cultivating bananas, sugarcane, vegetables. And then I came upon a home, which was actually an office for exporting pineapple, very common in Mauritius. And inside this home office was a tree with the village weaver's nest. This bird itself came in from sub-Saharan Africa. I think it was introduced in 1885 or thereabouts. And it's a sociable bird. It is a sociable colony breeder, which means that some trees you can see almost 100 nests. Typically, the bird takes its raw material from the coconut palms that you can see. It strips these palms. What was amazing was that these village weavers was the first sight that we encountered upon exiting the airport. This is actually the airport parking lot. I was with Perumal Murugan, an acclaimed writer from Tamil Nadu, and he said that these birds are called Thookanankuruvi in Tamil, and in fact there is a famous song by Kavinyar Kannadasan about them. So Perumal Murugan is with me, and he has a Tamil word for this birds. என்னங்க அது?
தூக்கணாங்குருவி.
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 அது தொங்குற மாதிரி.
ஆமா. அது இதே மாதிரி கூடு இருக்கும். வால் இன்னும் கொஞ்சம் நீளமா தொங்கும். ஓ. தென்னை மரம், பனை மரம் இதுலலாம் இதே மாதிரி தான் கூட்டமா கட்டும். ஓ. தூக்கணாங்குருவி, தூக்கணாங்குருவி கூடு பொங்க கண்டேன்னு கண்ணதாசன் ஒரு பாட்டு சினிமாவில் எழுதியிருக்கேன்.
ஓ ஆமா ஆமா ஆமா. அது ஏர்போர்ட்ல இந்த மாதிரி இருக்கும்னு நான் எதிரே பார்க்கல. There are 156 species of birds in Mauritius, and let's divide them up into endemic birds, native birds, migrant birds, and exotic birds. So what the endemic birds are species that are endemic to one country or distribution, which arrived there of their own means, unaided by humans. So in Mauritius, there are 9 surviving endemic land bird species. And with the exception of the Mauritius grey white-eye, I know it's a complicated name, grey white-eye, all the endemic species are threatened because you see there were predators introduced such as the feral cats, the rats, the mongooses, and the monkeys, and they all started feeding on these birds' eggs and cheeks. So what are endemic birds that you can only find in Mauritius? There's a Mauritius kestrel, the pink pigeon, the echo parakeet, the black bulbul, the Mauritius paradise flycatcher, Mauritius cuckoo shrike, and then a couple of species of white-eyes. Like I said, the grey white-eye is common through the island, but the olive white-eye is harder to see. Then there's a beautiful bird called the Mauritius fody with a red head. So that's the endemic bird species. Then you have the native birds. The native birds are found in Mauritius or any distribution, but they're also found in other places. They too arrived of their own means before the arrival of man. The only difference is that unlike endemic birds, native birds can be seen in other regions as well. So you have 3 land bird species in such as the Mascarene swiftlet, the Mascarene swallow, and the common moorhen, which can be found in other Mascarene islands such as Rodriguez and Reunion. Then in the water birds, you have the striated heron, which is the shore bird that is found in Mauritius, but occasionally we also see striated herons here in Bangalore. Then the third category is the seabirds, and you have 14 breeding seabird species such as the tropicbirds, the red-tailed tropicbird, several species of terns, petrels, frigate birds. These are all found in Mauritius. In fact, pelagic birds or seabirds are bountiful here because this is an island. Then you have the exotic or the migrant species, and occasionally what are called vagrants, which suddenly appear for no rhyme or reason. So Mauritius's migrant species include boobies such as the masked booby, you have the petrels, you have whimbrels, you have sandplovers, you have sanderlings. So these the migrant species include a number of seabirds that stop off in Mauritius before continuing their migrations. But back to the village weaver. We are going to link to a paper that talks about how a bird builds its nest, specifically the weaver bird. Because when you think about how a bird builds its nest, each one is different, each one is based on season, each one is based on choice of raw materials and also the courtship behavior. What are the forces of nature that move and guide a bird at each stage of its nest building? The paper says that these questions remain largely unanswered, and it attempts to answer this question for the common village weaver bird of Africa. And it describes the kinds of stitches that the weaver bird uses, how it hangs between two branches, almost like a yogi. It hangs upside down, holding its feet across two branches and maintains the position while it creates first a ring, and then it fills the ring with stitches of different kinds, simple stitches. Inside it uses feathers and other bulking up material. But the weaver bird's nest is typically a funnel or a kumbum, and then there is a little entrance on one side. So it's a fascinating paper, and I would urge you all to read it. The bird most associated with Mauritius is, of course, the flightless dodo, which went extinct thanks to arrival of humans. It has since become a symbol of what happens to bird species when human arrives. And I visited the Mauritius Wildlife Foundation, which sits on a 27-hectare island. And the goal there is to preserve what Mauritius looked like 400 years ago before the arrival of humans. They have habitats for the pink pigeon, the white eyes, the fody, and other, as well as mammals and reptiles. So Mauritius is involved in an essential experiment. On the one hand, the economy depends on tourists who come to these beautiful islands. On the other hand, part of the draw for tourists is Mauritius's beautiful nature, its biodiversity, and its splendid flora and fauna that includes this 120-year-old Aldabra giant tortoise, which is endemic to this region. This particular one is called Big Daddy because he is the mate for many of the female tortoises on the island. About 20 of them are found in this Mauritian Wildlife Foundation's private reserve, and they used to be widespread throughout the Seychelles, throughout the Mascarene Islands, but now they've been hunted extensively and need to be protected. So the question is, how does a nation that wants to protect its species do it? As you will see, the young woman who was our guide tells us that it began with the forest and they had to remove all the invasive species.
That focuses on the conservation of our endemic species, so plants and animals that we can only find in Mauritius and nowhere else. And here to conserve the animals, we had to restore the forest first. So we had to get rid of all the invasive plants and replace them with endemic and native one for the animals. I often think that the shell of the tortoises is very hard like rock, but it is not. The shell of a tortoise is very sensitive. It is about 2 centimeters for the adult one and made up of keratin, like our nails and hair. And on these lines here, That's all the nerves being connected to the organs. And the spinal cord is stuck from the head to the tail. So when we touch them, they feel absolutely everything. If I do this with the female, she feels everything.
Wow.
And that's like a little massage. She loves it. And that's also why here we advise people not to sit on them. Yeah, it hurts them and they can even get handicapped. So I cannot let you touch this female because I don't want to stress her with a big grip, but you can get close to her one by one and take some pictures if you want.
None of us touched the Aldabra giant tortoise, but we also moved on to skinks. Now this is the Mauritius giant skink, which, as she says, went extinct before man arrived.
Animals that are now extinct. But for this one, it was extinct before man came settle on Mauritius. So we don't know how it became extinct. It was never seen alive. And for the sculpture, for the skin, we got inspired by the tail-faced skink that we have on the island. And for the size, we have found fossils and bones on the main island.
Like she said, nobody knows how the Mauritius giant skink went extinct, and they use this skink, which is the Telfair skink, as the model for the sculpture that you just saw. Incidentally, you really should watch this episode on YouTube, because what you're looking at is a Telfair skink climbing up a tree. And habitat loss is one of the main reasons why these skinks are endangered. And they have this really neat trick where if a predator catches hold of them by their tails, they're able to shed their tails and regrow a new one. Besides habitat loss, skinks were endangered because of the fashion industry. And this is a success story for Mauritius because the Telfair skink is being preserved. The next bird that we're going to see is the Mauritius fody, F-O-D-Y, or fody, as she calls it.
There's the male fody here.
This male fody that she pointed out develops this red plumage on the head and neck during the breeding season, while the female keeps her olive green plumage all the year round. So this is a small, there you see both the male and the female. And this small passerine is endemic to Mauritius. And it feeds mainly on insects, nectar, and sometimes on the fruits and eggs of indigenous and exotic species. So these you see throughout the island, this preserve, and they're really like a shine of fire through the forests. So they're really lovely birds. The next bird we learnt about was the dodo, or rather we saw a sculpture of the dodo and learnt about it.
So the dodo had small wings because they stopped flying, and they would also build their nest on the ground. They are slow reproductors. They would lay only one egg per year. So when predators like rats, pigs, cats and dogs came to Mauritius, they would work on the eggs, eat the eggs, and that's the main reason why the dodo became extinct. Then people would also eat the meat of the dodo, but the meat tasted bad. It was very bad, so it was eaten occasionally. And the dodo also had big feet to run all around the forest and big beaks to crush fruit and seeds. The dodo would live up to 30 years, and the last one became extinct around 1681. So it's less than a century after the arrival of the Dutch, which was in 1598. And the closest relative of the dodo is the Nicobar pigeon that lives on the Nicobar Island in Sri Lanka. And we had bigger dodo as well. It's the average size of the dodo. You can have a look.
And finally, what you're looking at is the pink pigeon, which is a success story for this island. In 1986, only a dozen pink pigeons were still alive, and they could only be found in one place in Mauritius. After an intensive restoration program, an increase in the population happened, and currently there are about 400 birds in Mauritius. The pink pigeon feeds on fruits, leaves, fallen seeds of native and exotic plants. The female, much like everything in the bird kingdom, the female has a duller plumage than the male, but otherwise they have a similar morphology. So there's a certain area in this island that our guide led us to, and that's where we saw the pink pigeon. In Mauritius, nothing is as it seems because all around you see these magnificent blue waters, and you think, oh wow, how gorgeous this island is with all its coastlines. But I met Nicole, who is a scuba diver, a French educator, and an expert on oceans. And here's what she had to say.
The blue, light blue color means under the sea, it is a sandy. So that means it's type of kind of desert. There are less animals in the sand than in weeds, rocks. So
That means this sea with this beautiful color means there's nothing underneath.
not much. There's not much. There is some. There are a few fishes who like sand. A few fishes which are under the sand, but a lot less than inside the corals or inside when there is a seaweeds.
What is the color that it should have in order to, if you say it's a good color?
A good color is a more, you see, like there it's brown. That means there is corals.
Ah, okay.
So in between the corals there are places for fish to hide, and on the sand there is no place to hide.
And how do the corals reproduce?
There are two ways of reproductions. One
They cut themselves.
and the second one is laying eggs. The eggs float in the sea, and when they find the hard substrate, they grab it and start a new colony. You know that coral builds his house and then die, and then there was another one going on the top. So all the big coral is dead, and that's calcium. And then on the top you have the animal. The animal is still building and creating his house.
Like Nicole said, beware if it's too beautiful. If the water is too clear, that means there's nothing underneath. So with that, we leave this beautiful island, watching this Mauritius fody and also the pink pigeon, and how a group of people have come together to restore an ecosystem and save critically endangered bird species. We wish Mauritius all the best in its endeavors and want the island and its biodiverse fauna to thrive. Bird Podcast is produced by Ullas Anand and Echo Edu. I'm Shobha Narayan. Thank you for watching and listening.